In addition to exploring the ins and outs of drafting in this course, we're also going to have an introduction to architectural modeling. You're going to be making a lot of stuff in your tech-based class, where you'll explore different materials and their properties in terms of kind of a structural performance effect. In this case, we're talking about representational modeling that allows you to communicate ideas and show what your intention is with form and geometry in a material 3D environment. I just want to cover a few basic things to get started. These are mostly to keep you safe and make sure everything works well. First, if you have a nice work surface like a desk or a dining room table, you want to protect it. You want to make sure you don't cut into it and cause any damage that you can't repair. So you're going to use a cutting mat here. Everyone should have one. This is a 36 by 24 cutting mat. And what I want to make sure is that it protects the edge, so I'm not going to leave it in like this, just in case. Right? But it's got a little friction to it, so you can slide it around. And it might even help to take the edge down if you're not going to be moving it. In this case, this table is used for other stuff, so it has to move around. I'll just do my best to keep it kind of fixed in place. I have some material I'm going to cut. This is illustration board or motor board. They're very similar to chipboard, any kind of flat board material with a thickness of just about a 16th of an inch, so similar to what you're being asked to use. I'm also going to want my metal ruler. You must have rubber or cork on the back. This helps prevent it from sliding. Push on it here, it doesn't move around. It's just metal. It's likely to slide, which is a good way to cause damage to the thing you're trying to cut, as well as your fingers. We want to be careful, we don't want to hurt our fingers. And I think you can make it through your whole career without any major incidents if you just practice a few simple, safe rules. I'm also going to need a pencil for marking measurements and things like that, and a cutting knife. You can use the small number 11 X-Acto knife if you have it, but your fingers will get tired eventually, and you probably want to switch to this Olfa type box cutter knife with the snap-off blades. Now the reason they have these snap-off blades is that they're meant to be changed because they're kind of disposable and they get dull. So whenever this gets dull here at the tip, which happens pretty frequently when you're cutting heavy material, you want to snap this off and insert a new blade. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time cutting, you're going to start applying more force, and you're going to get gnarly cuts on the edges of your work, and potentially that's a good chance to apply too much force and pop up and get a finger or something else, or cause damage to what you're trying to cut. So you want to keep these really sharp. Sharp knife is the safest knife because it does its job and you don't have to hurt the blade. This one, you can't tell really where it's at, but we'll sacrifice one of these to see how to break it. So if I put out my blade just that little line there where the blade is already pre-scored, just past the end of the metal, and tighten it up using this, or whatever locking mechanism yours has. Some come with a little back plate piece here that you can take off and use to snap this. I don't bother, this one doesn't have it, it's been lost. The other way is to put the score side down on the table like this. Okay, so I'm going to be able to push into the table. Take the palm of my hand on the knife and just push it down until it pops. And the reason you put the hand over it is so this doesn't go flying off. It'll just break and maybe hit your hand, but it's not moving very fast. So when you do it without that, they can fly across the room, maybe hit someone in the eye. You don't want to be responsible for that. So we just put it down, apply pressure with your hand, catch it, and then we need to do something with this blade. We can't just throw these in the trash. We can put this in the trash, and everyone puts this in the trash, and somebody goes to take the trash out, they reach to tie the bag or press something down, or pick it up and put it into the trash, another trash receptacle. They might grab onto that in their hand and not have a very pleasant day. So we want to make sure these are kept somewhere safe. If you're doing this at home, you just get a soda bottle or something with a lid, some container with a lid, drop each one in there until it fills up, and then dispose of that safely. Or in the school, same thing applies. There's some sharp containers around the studios and wood shop as well. And one simple trick we can do is use a bit of tape to make them safer. This takes a lot of time. Why I would just get a bottle to use. But if you don't have it, you need to make sure this is safe. You can really wrap it up nice and solid there so the blade is no longer exposed to the tip. And that's a little bit better. But ideally, get a plastic bottle, something with a lid so if it knocks over, they don't spill everywhere. Just a 16-ounce soda bottle works well. And drop your blades in there and keep it handy so you're reminded to change often. If you're really meticulous about it, you might change your blade every 5 to 10 cuts. It's similar to sharpening your pencil for drafting. You just want to keep it nice and sharp. And you don't want to put it out more than that score line. By pressing on it or twisting, you might cause it to break, and it has a lot more exposed edge, which makes it pretty sharp. The exception to that could be if you're working with kind of thicker foam, you might need a little bit more blade to work with it, but foam is easy to cut, so you can be very careful with that respect. I'm going to keep mine short because we're just cutting thin board material. And you probably want one of the bigger ones like this. They're just a little more ergonomic, you can get a little bit more control, they last a little longer. But if you have a small one, you can keep the blade out just a little bit and be careful because they're a little bit more flexible. So let's cut. Got a cutting mat, got my metal ruler, got my knife, got some tape if I need it, handy nearby. I have the material I want to cut. So you're going to be making some cubes in this class, and so I could draw at the starting of that here, maybe make a very, very crude small one, or go through some of the first steps. But before we get into that, let's just make some cuts. If I wanted to make a really small cube, one thing I could do is just cut off a strip of this that is 1 inch long. Now, similar to drawing, right, the more we have to measure, the more we're likely to have some inaccuracy. So if I want to measure those two 1 inch in, it's a good practice just to measure twice, confirm it really quick before I go ahead and cut it. I don't need to draw another line here. I'm going to draw one for the video. You do not need to draw that line. In fact, it might be better if you don't want that graphite on your final piece, but I want you to see that those line up. There are also some tools similar to your triangles that you could get. Triangle won't work because the triangle is flexible. I've seen some videos online where you can glue another piece of acrylic on here, or you could just buy a square or speed square for drawing and model making that will, just like a parallel rule, click to the parallel edges of your material. Now that means you have to make sure that some edge on this is cut clean and parallel, so you might even just do the first clean cut across the whole thing without measuring, just to make sure it's clean. Don't ever trust the material you buy. It might not be straight, it might not have gotten taped up in shipping, so you want to make a nice clean edge first. In this case, this one I'm about to cut will become a clean edge for this piece, and then I can determine if these are actually square relative to them. So always be skeptical of whether things that you see if they're square and know that you're going to work inside of them and not probably use the edges. You don't want to cut with your triangle or other things like that. They're soft plastic, easily get scratched. It can catch the knife along the edges and imperfections, cause it to jump up, cause it to come across your fingers. We don't want that. We've all probably got our scars from it. So we want to use this metal ruler. I like to have a small one around, and again, always with the back there. I repeat that a lot, so I want everyone to be safe. Now, it might seem straightforward and kind of ergonomic that we line this ruler up with the two dots there. I'm not going to worry about the line, I just want to follow the two dots. And I come in and make sure the blade side is down. Don't want to push on that accidentally, a little cut. And then pull across this. But I want to be considerate of the direction I'm going to pull. If I pull like this, and I pull too hard or I slip and keep going, it's likely that the knife will go into myself. It's something we've seen happen, so you want to make sure to pull away from yourself. That doesn't mean backwards out here, or even fully to the side, but just not directly at your body. And make sure your legs are not under the cut or anything like that. So that's the first step. Just tilt it a little bit to the side. That way, when I pull, right, it's just going to go over there. If I make a slip up, hopefully nobody is standing or sitting close to you like that. So should be safe. The other thing you want to make sure is that your fingers don't overlap the ruler or something like this. So you get in the habit, kind of like a chef, like holding down back here, spread out, make sure your thumb's not out there, and just hold back on the ruler. You can get safety rulers that have a little edge here for your fingers to press against, and if you can find one, I recommend it. They're sometimes a little more expensive, but those can be really helpful because there's no chance for your fingers to slip. Now with a non-slip ruler, I'm pushing pretty hard on this and it's not going anywhere. And I've used these for my entire career, so I think they work pretty well. Once that's in place, I'm going to cut myself. Let's come here, start my line, and not applying too much pressure and pushing down. You feel it cutting through the fibers of the paper, but it probably wasn't enough to go through in one pass, and that's not my goal. I'm do that one pass, maybe bring it up and check. I wouldn't bring it up and check myself for you because there's really not much benefit in it, but we can see that I didn't get all the way through, and now lining back up with my cut is harder, so it's best not to move it. But for the purpose of the demonstration, I'll do my best. Line it back up, and that line will guide your cut the next time. So I'll pull again, a little bit of pressure, I can feel some resistance. I'm not pushing so hard that there's any shaking. If that happens at all, your blade is too dull. You gotta change it. And there's no skipping or friction. It's not popping out at the end. My arm's not going back. And I'll just go a couple times, and at some point you're gonna feel that I went there and cut. So the cutting mat, you've got a nice, crisp, clean cut and edge there. Now, this piece of material has been hanging around for a while, so it might have been dirty already, but I'm already getting some smudging, so you want to make sure if you're switching from drawing to model making that you clean your hands pretty well in your work surface area. And that's another reason why we don't want to draw on this cutting mat if we can avoid it, because we don't want it to be dirty. We want to keep this clean, get some Windex, some other surface cleaner and paper towels to keep all this very clean so that you don't end up with lots of graphite and other dirt smudges on your material. But that's a basic introduction to just being able to cut some material, mark your measurements, some tips and tricks with that we can follow. Now that I know this is a nice crisp edge, maybe I'll go to 2-inch measurement, is that you can use the knife blade. And if you have a ruler like mine, that the measurements go all the way to the end, you can do it there, or it's just a ruler where they're held back, follow the line. And you can just do a little pressure to mark a tick mark there. So you don't have to put any pencil or graphite on your stuff. Now, I want to have the ruler on the material that I'm going to keep. So I'm going to turn that around because I want to keep this part, this 2-inch strip that I'm measuring, and this is discard or used for something else. The reason is, it's more likely you might have to cut out to release something or just make a mistake than it is that you're cut in, as long as you're holding your ruler down tight. Now I can look and see if I can find my tick marks. Probably cannot see those in the video, they're very small. That's the benefit of them, since they won't show up later in a wall. And again, pull on it myself, my leg, gentle pressure, and 2 or 3 passes, and I've got that released. Now I have a nice 2-inch strip that I can use to make a cube.